Welcome back. A strange condor. Meanwhile, the other group was huddled in the cave where they'd sought shelter from a condor. Caw-caw! They could still hear its cries, but now they seemed to come from farther and farther away. After a moment or two, Pamela cautiously approached the cave opening and peeked outside. I think it's gone. Is it normal for a bird to make such loud sounds? Asked Violet. She was a little shaken. Pam put her paw around her friend's shoulder. I don't know, but it sure was creepy. Professor Sagefur frowned. I hope Paulina and the other mouselings located another shelter. We must find them at once. Scanning the area around them, they crept out of the cave. There was no sign of the condor in the sky, but Violet noticed that the strange animal had left something near the cave's mouth. She bent down and picked up a black feather. A feather from the condor? Asked the professor. A feather, yes, but not from the condor, said Violet. This is a raven's feather. Are you sure? Asked Professor Sagefur. Pamela nodded. Professor, when Violet says she knows something, you can bet your whiskers it's true. And hey, what's this? She bent down and examined the ground. She rested her paw on a dark splotch, then brought her fingers up to her snout. But this is motor oil. Motor oil? Violet and the professor exclaimed. And it's still fresh, said Paulina, nodding. But how could a car climb all the way up here? It couldn't, confirmed the professor. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Asked Violet. Pam nodded. There's something not quite right about the flying condor, she concluded, scrutinizing the sky. Professor Sagefur nodded in agreement. Someone is trying to scare us. Violet frowned. We've got to find Colette, Nikki, and Paulina right away. So let's review. How could a condor lose a raven's feather? Why is the condor making such loud, harsh cries? Condors are known to be silent birds. And where did the motor oil come from? Could it be from the condor? An unexpected encounter. At the bottom of the dark hole, Paulina, Nikki, and Colette were getting ready to venture through the door they'd discover. In the pitch black, Nikki's small flashlight was not very helpful. They caught a glimpse of a spacious room with walls covered with pictures. Cheese niblets! Had the mouselings ended up in an Incan tomb? Suddenly, a shadowy figure flung itself at them. Squeak! Cried Colette. Something struck Nikki's arm. The flashlight fell from her paw and went out. They were in complete darkness. No way, cried Nikki. It's like we're the three blind mice all over again. Don't worry, I've got him, yelled Paulina. Nikki and Colette tried to give her a paw, but they found themselves roughly shoved against the wall. Paws off the fur, you slimy sewer rat, yelled Colette, punching the air. She hit Paulina by accident. Caught off guard, Paulina let go of her captive. The shadowy figure seized the opportunity to run off, but suddenly the three mouselings heard a thud and a cry of pain. Ow! Then all was quiet, 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 quiet. At last, a thin sliver of light illuminated the scene. Nikki had found her flashlight. Show me your snout, you cowardly tomcat, she shouted, pointing it at him. Finally, Colette, Nikki, and Paulina had a good look at him. Why, it's Gonzalo, cried Paulina. Colette, Nikki, and Paulina had found Professor Sagefur's son. Dad! Paulina? Gonzalo stuttered in surprise. For 3 seconds, the two of them stared at each other in silence, too shocked to speak. Then they threw their paws around each other. Gonzalo was happy. Paulina, it's been so long since we last saw each other, I almost didn't recognize you. Colette was the first one to break up the happy reunion. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it would be better to continue this conversation back outside in daylight. Ditto, exclaimed Nikki. Let's get out of here. Gonzalo gestured for the mouselings to follow him. Together, all 4 mice made their way down the dark tunnel. The exit is this way, explained Gonzalo. You came in through the back door. Gonzalo, Colette, Nikki, and Paulina scampered along the long corridor, headed slightly uphill. After a few turns, they finally saw the light of day. They emerged right outside of the cave where Pamela, Violet, and the professor had found shelter. Dad! Cried Gonzalo. Gonzalo! Exclaimed Professor Sagefur. The professor and Gonzalo hugged each other tight. So did Colette, Nikki, Pamela, Paulina, and Violet. They were relieved to find one another safe and sound. Paulina quickly introduced Gonzalo to her 4 friends. There had been so much excitement, Professor Sagefur suggested they make their campsite right where they were standing. It's time for some tea, proposed Violet. She was eager to celebrate their reunion. Unfortunately, the llamas had run away with all their food, and who could blame them? Everyone had been terrified by the condor's mysterious attack. There's nothing to do but go on a llama hunt, Paulina said with a sigh. Luckily, Nikki and Pamela found the llamas in a field nearby, grazing peacefully. 20 minutes later, the group had all their equipment and provisions. They settled into their new campsite. You must forgive me for my behavior back there, said Gonzalo, sipping his tea. In the dark, I mistook you for my attackers. What attackers? Asked his father. 3 nasty mice jumped me out of nowhere. I didn't realize it at the time, but... They'd been following me, exclaimed Gonzalo. They stole everything I had, even my notebooks. And to think that I came so close to the secret city. Gonzalo Francisco Sagefur graduated with the highest of honors in pre-Columbian archaeology at the University of Lima in Peru. Pre-Columbian archaeology is a branch of archaeology that focuses on civilizations in North and South America before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. Gonzalo focuses on 3 civilizations, the Aztec, the Maya, and the Incan. That's terrible, said Nikki. They were a real pack of cheeseheads, stated Gonzalo. I fought with all my might, and eventually I was able to escape. I ran off and hid in a cave. That must be the same cave we hid in, said Professor Sagefur. It certainly looks like it, said Gonzalo. That's where I discovered these old Incan remains. I found amazing objects and engravings. But why did you stay here? Asked his father. You've been missing for 2 weeks. I didn't hear a squeak out of you. I was so worried. Why didn't you turn around and ask for help? Gonzalo lowered his eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to worry you so much, but I really couldn't turn around. I needed to keep an eye on those rat burglars. I wanted to find out who they were so I could report them. I was terrified they'd enter the secret city, and I wanted to be sure that they didn't ruin or rob the amazing antiquities there. Professor Sagefur was silent. He had a stern look on his snout. You are a reckless son, Gonzalo, but you are a great archaeologist, he said at last, smiling. I'm proud of you. The suspicious plans of a suspicious character. Were you able to find out who your attackers were? Asked Paulina. Gonzalo nodded. They are Paca Manadunca's henchmice. Paco Manadunca? That sorry excuse for a rodent, exclaimed Professor Sagefur. He had turned bright red with indignation. He's an archaeologist, too, he explained to the Thea sisters. Gonzalo nodded. Professor Manadunca is an archaeologist who is very highly regarded by many, but my father and I have long suspected that he's sneaky and dishonest. Still, I never would have thought that he would be capable of something like this, Professor Sagefur said, shaking his snout. You wouldn't have been able to do anything, Dad, said Gonzalo. Manadunca is greedy, disloyal, and dangerous. He's been spying on me ever since I found the quipu. He pretended to be excited about my research. Oh, yes, excited enough to steal it, Professor Sagefur's whiskers were shaking with rage. Excuse me, but what is the chip, you know, what you said? Quipu. The Incas had a very unusual way of keeping records. Instead of writing numbers on paper or papyrus or on tablets, the Incas made knots on multicolored ropes. If the quipu were a calculator, the knots would correspond to numbers. In fact, the word quipu means knots. Using their quipu, the Incas were able to perform very quick and precise calculations. Thanks to the quipu, every Incan governor was able to register the number of people who lived in his territory and how much tax money was owed by the state, or owed to the state. The Incas did not have anything that the people of today recognize as writing. The quipu were made from a series of multicolored ropes with knots on them. They were used to count. but some historians believe they were also used to compose and preserve epic poems and legends. The number and position of the knots, as well as the color of each cord, indicated different things. It is very hard to interpret the quipu. The meaning of the knots and colors remains a mystery. Perhaps a gold string was used to mean the sun or the Incan king. Quipu is the Incan form of record keeping, explained Gonzalo. You found a quipu? Asked Paulina. Yes, I was lucky enough to find a quipu that reveals the location of the secret city. But somehow Manadunka got his greedy paws on my notes. He followed me up here to steal my discovery. Pamela took out the raven's feather, which she'd been keeping in her pocket. Gonzalo, is there a condor in your story? One that squawks like a loud squeaker, spits out motor oil, and is covered in raven's feather? So again, we're going to look at our clues. The condor, the motor oil, and the feather. Aren't you a smarty paws, Pamela? Said Gonzalo, beaming at her. That's great, but would you be so kind as to explain it to us too? Asked Colette, who was having trouble keeping up with all the news. Yes, please do, said Professor Sagefur. What does Manadunka have to do with the condor? It's not a real condor. It's a motorized hang glider disguised as a condor, exclaimed Gonzalo. Manadunka and his henchmice have covered it in feathers. They're using it to scare the local mice. But why? Asked Colette. Once Manadunka discovered the location of the secret city, he wanted to keep curious mice away, said Gonzalo. He was sure he'd be able to get in easily. But if they're still using the fake condor to scare rodents away, that must mean that Manadunka hasn't found what he was looking for. Violet squeaked slowly. Your friends are really brainy, Paulina, exclaimed Gonzalo. That's right. He wasn't able to find the city on his own. That's why Manadunka has his henchmice attack me and steal my notebooks. But my notes don't explain how to open the door of the sun, which is the only way to get into the secret city. It would probably be easier for him to destroy the door than to open it, blurted Professor Sagefur. Professor Paco Manadunka. Professor Manadunka is an unscrupulous archaeologist. His full name is Paco Felipe Manadunka. One of his ancestors arrived in Peru with the Spanish conquistadors. At his words, everyone fell silent. It was as if the shadow of an enormous cat had fallen over them. Yes, a slimy sewer rat like Manadunka would stop at nothing if it meant he could get his hands on the hidden Incan treasure, said Gonzalo. It sounds like you think he would even destroy the secret city, cried Paulina. I still don't quite understand, said Colette. Where exactly is the secret city? Gonzalo pointed up. It's right there. Nicky leaped to her paws. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go stop him. And we will find out about the door of the sun the next time we read.